Okay, so what we're going to do in roughly the next 40 minutes or so is we're going to walk through a quick overview of what the Entrepreneurial Operating System is. As I looked at the list of attendees today, a lot of you I know are either using EOS already or know about it. And so for that, it'll be a review. You'll maybe pick up a nugget or two. For those of you that are new to it, we will try to give you the quick overview here. So here we go. So basically, when I do this, I have two goals. Number one is I want you to look at your organization differently and show you a way to simplify things and give you more control. And I say organization because a fair number of my clients are actually not businesses. They're charitable organizations, they're science labs, they're government bodies, believe it or not. And so the beauty of this system is it works in any organization if you're willing to embrace the tool set. And my second goal for today, quite honestly, for those of you new to this, give you some tools that are practical and simple. They'll be designed to help you get more done and gain more traction. So who am I? I think Les already went through this. The big thing for me is, I'm a seasoned business leader, which means I've been around a long time. I have a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch in me. I'm a passionate coach, but I'm also a recovering CPA. So sometimes that stoic CPA thing betrays me when it comes to the passion part coming across, but I am very passionate about helping my clients. One of the things I want to do is make sure that I'm maximizing the value of the client. I spent some time on the buy side, buying some small companies, and that's actually how I got into Traction in 2009. I was a client for 2 years before becoming an implementer. And so I was assembling a list of things of what made companies valuable to buy. And here's a quick list for anybody here that's thinking about an exit strategy. Obviously, a track record of profitable growth. Leadership team in place. You'd be surprised how many times I looked at businesses that didn't have a team. It was all the owner. Executing against an actual strategy. Having something documented that you're working against. Having an active working sales function. Some clients or some companies that I worked with in the past have a show up and hope sales strategy. Documented processes. If you're thinking about selling someday, the more you have documented processes, the more you've systemized the business, the more likely it is somebody that isn't from your industry could actually acquire it. Clean, organized facility. It's amazing the impression that makes when you show somebody the business. And seventh and most important, I think, is a positive, vibrant culture. And that's one of the things we focus on with EOS. So what I do is I help business owners get what they want from their business. And we do that by doing three things we call vision, traction, healthy. And this is the three uniques of EOS. Vision from the standpoint of getting everybody 100% on the same page, where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. Traction from actually implementing a set of tools that help you execute against that vision with discipline and accountability. And healthy from the standpoint of creating a healthy, cohesive organization where there's no politics, we're all working for the greater good. Ultimately, we want to improve your growth rate and profitability, and which ultimately increases the value. So Gino Wickman created this system roughly 20 years ago, maybe not quite 20 years ago. And he wrote the book Traction. It was a discovery when working with businesses, and he found that businesses fell into two camps. You have the smiling one up on the upper right here, and you have the frustrated one in the lower left, and there's roughly about a 90-10 ratio there. And so if you're one of those smiley people, you're probably not going to be too interested in what I have to say. But if you're one of the ones with some frustrations, you may want to take some notes. So the top 5 frustrations that I run into when I work with clients is, number one, they've lost control of the business. The business is kind of controlling them. They've gotten to a growth point where they can't get their arms around it anymore. Or maybe they have a profitability issue. They got a lot of business, but they're not making the kind of money they like. They have trouble getting the right people in the right seats, getting them to do what they want them to do. Or they've got stuck. Sometimes you hear the stories, people get stuck at, 20 employees or at 5 million or whatever. So you hit that ceiling, you can't figure out how to break through. Or they're trying all kinds of new stuff and nothing's working. And so if one of those 5 things is happening, there's a lot of opportunity for EOS to help. So let's talk a little bit about the history of EOS. So when I started, I actually was trained as an EOS implementer after being a client for 2 years, literally 9 years to the day today. When I was trained, we walk out every quarterly session with a count of how many companies are running on EOS. And at that point in time, there was 376 companies running on EOS. And Gino had a goal that by 2020, we'd have 10,000 companies running on EOS. And we are definitely right on the cusp of that, if not quite there yet. I haven't got the official word on it, but we were past 9,700 last time we had a quarterly session. So the goal is really right on track. And our goal with the client is to accomplish 5 things. And this is for not just the owner, but for everybody in the organization. We want people to be in an environment where they do what they love. They want them to be with people they love being around. In other words, in a culture they enjoy. We want them to be able to make a difference and have an environment where we're able to compensate people adequately and also have enough work-life balance. There's time for other passions. So that's the goal for every client and all of the people in their organizations. How the model works is it's built on 6 key components of EOS. Gino discovered, working with companies, that to the extent you can maximize your effectiveness in 6 key components, everything just seems to fall into place better. So it starts with your organization at the center. And the first key component is vision. We have to have a clear vision where we're going, how we're going to get there, so everybody knows what the mission is. Number 2, once we have that clear vision, we have to have great people to execute that vision. Number 3, we have to have a strong data component where we're making decisions based on hard facts and data, not emotions and panic. Number 4, issues. Believe it or not, that's a component, and because the people that can set those issues up and knock them down the best are the ones that are most successful. So we have to get really good at identifying and solving issues. Number 5, as I mentioned earlier, the process, documenting a process is important. Process is how we systemize the business. It gives us scalability, and it's very important as you grow to build that process out. And then lastly, the traction components, where the tire meets the road, so to speak. And what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we are executing against our vision, and we have some tools to do that. And so I'm going to walk through each of these and give you a couple of nuggets on each one, and then talk about some of the things I've seen go wrong or maybe not get maximized like they should. So let's talk about the vision component first. What does 100% strong look like? In our world, it's about answering 8 questions. So when I engage with a sales prospect, sometimes I have people that are very focused on, hey, we need a strategic plan, and they got this vision in their head about some big comprehensive document. And I've been there, done that in my career, and had people give me a nice big binder of data and not be able to execute against it. And so the beauty of what got me involved with EOS to begin with was the simplicity of the vision part of it. It really boils down to answering 8 questions. And if you look at any strategic plan, these questions are buried in that document somewhere. And the questions are simply this: what are our core values? What's our core focus? What's our 10-year target or our long-range target? What's our marketing strategy? What's our 3-year picture? What's our 1-year plan? What are our quarterly rocks? And what are all the issues we need to confront? So what I'll do is walk through each of these in a little bit more detail so you know what these terms actually mean. And so here we go. So core values is a discovery exercise we do with every client. Whether you already have your core values established or not, we go through this exercise either to validate what you already have, maybe update what you already have. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to define here is what is the culture of the organization. This is the definition of a right person. If somebody fits your culture at some acceptable level, they're a right person for your organization. So we want to get crystal clear on what that is as we build out our organization. Second question is, what's our core focus? What we're doing here is we're answering 2 key questions for every organization. Number 1, why are we here? What is our purpose, our cause, our passion? Every organization exists to make a profit, I get that. But there's usually some major driver behind that the founder had in mind when they started the business. We want to know that why, a compelling why. Number 2 on the core focus is what do we do? This is usually the easy part to do, right? Everybody knows what you do. A lot of times people don't know why they do it. And so we want to get crystal clear on that. And then the third question that I want to talk about right now is the 10-year target. So we call it a 10-year target because most of our clients pick a 10-year target, but we call it a core target as well and say pick any time frame you want as long as it's at least 5 years out. 5 years out. And what we're really saying is here, what's the long game? Jim Collins refers to it as a big, hairy, audacious goal. What are we trying to accomplish in the long term here? And so I call this the big 3. If you can answer these 3 questions crystal clear, what are our core values, what's our core focus, and what's our 10-year target for every person in the organization, they can engage, they can decide, hey, is this someplace I want to be? Am I excited about it? And then how can I help? So these are huge questions to answer, and they're very important. The fourth question is, what is our marketing strategy? And we take a very simplistic approach to this. The nuts and bolts of this is we want everybody in the organization, who do we talk to and what do we say to them when we talk to them? And so the who do we talk to is our target market. Who do we see as our best prospects to work with? Where are they located geographically? Is there some descriptors demographically, size, revenue, industry, things like that? And are there psychographics? There are certain things about the way they think. The clearer we are on who those best prospects are for success, the better our success rate will be on closing deals. And then the uniques really address the psychographic, is what is it about our organization that sets us apart? There's 3 things we want to boil down as differentiators. Each of us has a lot of competition in our business. What are 3 things that we can say about our business that other people can't say? Okay. You might share 1 or 2 of them with your competitors, but the third one's going to set you apart. It gets you away from that price, me too kind of thing. The last 2 pieces of the marketing strategy exist in about half of my clients. It's a proven process and a guarantee. Proven process is simply a visual aid that your salespeople can use that say, hey, when you do business with us, here's how it works. So I use one of these and I say, okay, if we decide to engage in the EOS process, it's about a 2-year journey, and here's what the journey looks like, and here are the steps along the way. It'll give you a feel for what you're signing up for, and also some confidence that, hey, I know what I'm doing, I've been there, done that. If that exists for your organization, we definitely want to make that happen. If it doesn't, we just kind of set it aside, because some organizations just don't really have one that works across the board for every client. And then the guarantee is the same way. Is there some commitment you can make to your customer? I always use the Men's Warehouse guy. You know, you're gonna like the way you look, I guarantee it. It's not a financial commitment, but it's a commitment to the customer. Hey, if you buy your suit from me, you're gonna look good. And so if we can state something like that, we definitely want to call that out as well. The next question is, what is our 3-year target? So we got that big, hairy, audacious goal, that 10-year target we threw out there. That's pretty abstract for a lot of people. Can we bring it closer to the ground? So if we do really good work over the next 3 years, you know, what does it look like at the end of 2023? Can we sit down and say what our revenue should be, what our profit should be, what are some key metrics we're going to drive for, at least one key measurable? And then this is where the long-range plan is so different from a strategic plan, is we're just going to try to describe this in about 15 or less bullets. What does it look like? Do we have a new building? Have we implemented some new software? We bought some new equipment? How many people do we have? What are some attributes of the business? The goal here is to really come up with about 10 to 15 things that describe the business crystal clear, where at the end of the exercise, you could all close your eyes. I can read it back. You can actually picture it in your mind. This is our long-range plan right here. From here, we want to take it to the ground and get the traction piece in place. And so what we do from here is we say, okay, now that we're clear where we want to be in 2023, let's draft our plan for 2021. So what does our revenue need to be there? What's our profit there? How are we going to move on our measurable? You know, we're going to make some progress towards that 3-year picture. And then we're going to say, okay, what are the 3 to 7 goals for the year? One of the things you'll find with EOS, if you work with it, is the mantra is always keep it simple, less is more. So we don't believe in setting 20 goals and hoping to get 10 done. We're going to push you hard to come up with 3 to 7, focus on them, agree on them, and get them done. We don't believe in shooting for the stars and hoping to land on the moon. We want to shoot for the moon and make sure we hit it. So we work really hard to say, okay, what are the 4 or 5 things we need to get done next year? What are they? Make them crystal clear, make sure we're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, and then go out there and make them happen. Once we've got that agreed to, then our 7th question is, okay, what are our rocks? Okay, so now we've set our goals for the year. That's really great. What are we going to do in the next 90 days to make those goals happen? So rocks are really our term for short-term goals, taken from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. And what we want to do is we want to recognize that as human beings, we can lose focus from time to time. We can do a great job of doing a strategic plan right now and setting our budget and our goals for the year, but we need to check in every 90 days and see how we're doing on that. And part of that process is to set milestones or rocks for the next 90 days. So if we're sitting here today saying, okay, we got our goals for 2021, what do we have to do the next 90 days? Well, how much revenue and profit do we have to generate to be on track? What do we have to do for measurables? And then what are the 3 to 7 biggest priorities to accomplish that are going to make those goals happen? We want to get specific about this, and we want to get a little bit different here. We're going to actually identify some accountability. We're going to say who on the team is responsible for making these things happen. Once we're clear on that, we set these as company priorities. We'll also set some individual level priorities because we want everybody on the team doing at least a couple of rocks. And so we'll set some secondary rocks too. So every 90 days, everybody's doing some rocks. And then the last question is, what's our issues list? So what we want to do here is we want to park all that stuff that we know we have to do someday, or we may think we have to do someday, but we don't have time to focus on it right now. We've set our rocks for the quarter. Those are the priorities. We want to stay focused on those. Hopefully, if we've done a good job of predicting what those priorities are, we'll be able to establish a way to get ahead of the game and do some things that are going to help us save time. In a perfect world, we do a great job setting those rocks at the highest priority, most impactful things for the organization. When we do that, the end result of that is we're going to free up some time because we're going to clean up some processes. We're going to accomplish something that's been holding us back. Everything else that's on our issues list is parked here. It's either something else we got to solve down the road, maybe an opportunity we want to take a look at, trying to leverage down the road, but it's something we're going to park here. So when we get together 90 days from now, we'll be able to revisit this list, hopefully check off all the rocks is done, and say, okay, what's next to work on? So those are the 8 questions. So 100% strong here means that the leadership team has wrestled through these 8 questions and agreed and is excited about it. And then from there, it's shared by all. In other words, if you have 50 people in your organization, all 50 people share that vision. So what are some things that can go wrong with this? Well, common issues I've seen is sometimes there's a lack of real agreement within the leadership team. So in other words, one of our things is there's one team and one team only, and whether you agree or disagree with something, once we've decided, we're on the same page and we're walking the talk. Sometimes teams don't do that. And so we got to make sure that we got everybody on the same page. Number 2, sometimes the vision is not that exciting. It lacks passion. It doesn't include everyone. You know, sometimes we'll get visions that we want to grow to be a $50 million company, which is probably exciting for the owner or maybe the leadership team, but maybe isn't excited for the people in the trenches. So we want to put something into that vision that's got some pizzazz, that gets people fired up and actually helps you draw people into the organization. Another issue is sometimes we don't communicate it beyond the leadership team. When we say shared by all, we literally mean shared by all. We want everybody in the organization to see this, and we want everybody in the organization to be engaged in making it happen. And sometimes it's really great for the leadership team to be on the same page, but it's really powerful when everybody's on the same page. Another common issue is it's communicated in a redacted form. And the truth there is it's hard for people a lot of times to share some of the numbers stuff. And so my mission with every client is to help them educate their employees on what they're looking at and hopefully take some of that redacted information off of there and make it more visible as we get healthier as an organization. And then lastly, not shared by all. It's obviously utopia is having everybody in the organization passionate about your vision. It's hard to get there. Obviously, I get that. And so our mission is always to have everybody on the same page, sharing the vision, and not just shared with them, but shared by them. Okay, so one thing I've really neglected to say is we'll take questions at the end. So if you want to send those via chat to Amy, we can do that. So that's the vision component. Our philosophy, of course, is vision without traction is hallucination. So we can have this great vision, and I've seen this before where people have actually self-implemented and put together a document like this, but they've never actually executed against it. And so my goal is to help you execute against it. So let's talk about some of the other components that help us execute against it. The people component is about two things. It's about having the right people in the right seats. And so the first thing is, what does the right people look like? Well, we talk about the core values defining our culture. And so what we do is we actually have a tool in the toolkit called the People Analyzer. And what we want to do is we want to run our people through this analyzer. So if you look at this example, I've got 5 core values listed across the top of the page. We want to list the names on the left-hand column. And then we want to score people against this. And this is somewhat subjective, but scientific in a way. And what you're really doing is you're saying if somebody exhibits the core value most of the time, you give them a plus. If they don't most of the time, give them a minus. And if it's kind of depends on the day of the week and what's going on, then give them a plus or minus. And so we can go through this exercise and we go by each core value and give people a score and say, okay, what are they? How do they look? Are they meeting what we're looking for expectations? And what we do is we push for setting a bar. So in this example, we've got 5 core values. The bar the organization set is for somebody to be a right person for the organization. They have to have 3 of them most of the time, and they have to have the other 2 at least half of the time. And if they're not meeting that level, they're below the bar and it's a conversation, and we either move them up or at some point it becomes a people issue that we have to solve. The second question is, what are the right seats looking like? And so we use a tool called the accountability chart. And the fundamental you have to buy into with this is every organization has to do 3 things very well at its core. You have to be able to sell your product or service. You have to be able to deliver your product or service. And you have to keep track of the money. It's a 3-legged stool, and those 3 things have to be there. The other thing you have to buy into is we need somebody to make sure everything's working harmoniously in the organization. We call that an integrator. And in general business, it's typically somebody like a general manager or a chief operating officer or something like that, but we don't get into the title thing so much. We just give it a functional name. So we start here, and what we do is we customize it for every organization from here. One customization is about half the time there's a visionary in your organization. A visionary is that person that's got 20 ideas a week. They're very creative. They like the big relationships. They like the culture. They really don't like a day-to-day business. They get bored easily, and they'll tend to whipsaw the organization around if they're trying to run the organization. So we want to make sure if that person exists, we want to call that out and set them free to be what they're good at, and then put somebody in the integrator seat that can be focused on executing against the plan, making sure the profit and loss is there, and taking those great ideas the visionary has and mapping them in somehow to the schedule and making it happen. The other area we customize is on the bottom rung of the ladder here. So we got these three legs on the stool. We want to customize that for your organization based on what your organization is. Some people split sales and marketing. Some people have multiple areas of operations. Some people have finance doing HR and IT. Some people split out HR. What we want to do is get the right structure for you. The goal here is to come up with the right structure first, then come back and talk about the people. So how this works is we come up with the structure, we define each seat, and what we do is we say, okay, what's the function that we're filling, and then we call it an accountability chart because we map in the 5 key accountabilities that seat has to deliver. So you might have a 3-page job description, but at the end of the day, we want to put right on this chart what the 5 most important things that seat delivers is. And then when we got that exercise done, Then we map in the name and say, okay, how does that name fit? Does that person have the skills that they need to do that job? And the questions comes down to three things there. We want to say, if somebody's in the right seat, they do three things we call GWC. Number one, they get it. So they're mentally wired to do it. Two, they want it. They jump out of bed every day wanting it. And three, or C, they have the capacity to do it. In other words, they have the skills and training necessary. So to put it in the context of myself as a CPA, a recovering CPA, I get it. When I was in public accounting, I get it. I understand numbers. I'm good at numbers. I could do auditing. I could do taxes. It was just in my brain, I could do that kind of stuff. I did not want it. I hated that kind of work. So I was a yes on get it. I was a no on want it. Capacity, I was definitely a yes. And so at the end of the day, I had my CPA certificate, I had my accounting degree, I could do it. So the goal with every seat is when you go back and you score it, you want 3 yeses. You want somebody that gets it, wants it, and has the capacity to do it. The only place we are tolerating a no here is in the capacity, and that's assuming we have a plan to get somebody some training and development necessary. If you're trying to train somebody that doesn't get it, you're wasting your time and you should just solve the problem early. If you're trying to train somebody that doesn't want it, you're wasting both of your time. And so what we want to do is make sure that we get some people in place that get it and want it and either have the capacity to do it or we can get them up to speed quickly. So at the end of the day, we want the structure built out for the whole organization. It looks something like this accountability chart where we've got all the functions laid out with the names and the accountabilities. And so 100% strong here means you have all the people in the organization meeting your bar for core values and everybody's in the right seat. They get, want, and have the capacity to do it. So what are some common things that we see here? Well, obviously the first one is we have the right person, but in the wrong seat. We've got nice people in the organization, they fit our culture, but they don't have the skills to deliver on the job, or the seat's outgrown them. And so we're doing both of us a disservice by not addressing that issue in some way. Secondly, this is one of the harder ones to deal with. You got somebody in the right seat. In other words, they're really performing, but they're the wrong person. They are a competent person, but they're toxic to your culture. Eventually, you want to deal with these things, and it's hard to convince some of my clients early on to do this, but as they do, it becomes more and more apparent that the culture toxicity has been an issue that they should have addressed a long time ago. It's kind of the elephant in the room, so to speak. Another mistake we'll see, and this is common, is to try to build the structure around the existing people. When I facilitate this in the session, I say we're going to forget our names, we're going to forget our titles, we're going to forget our roles, we're all on the board of directors, and we're defining the structure because we know what the company needs. It's a hard conversation to keep focused on because people always naturally go back to the people that are in the organization today. But we really want to come up with what's the right structure to take us through the next 12 to 18 months, and then come back and say, okay, what are the people gaps we have here? Is it a training issue? Is it somebody in the wrong seat issue? What is it? And the last thing here is probably a big one for me is tolerating lingering people issues. It kind of ties back to the right seat, wrong person. But the standard saying here is what you tolerate is what you endorse. And so if we're really focusing on right people, right seats, and we're saying that to our organization, if we don't address it, then we're really contradicting ourselves and we're tolerating less performance than we should. What I find in my clients that have really embraced this the most is they stay focused on the core values thing. Over time, they gradually create a better culture and they really get a cohesive team built. It's not something you can do overnight, but it does come along over time. Okay, the data component. First thing about the data component is we want to develop scorecards. So scorecards are our words for dashboards or executive flash reports or whatever. But at the end of the day, we really want to come up with a scorecard that looks something like what you see here. So it's basically a spreadsheet and it has a few data points on it. We want to come up with 5 to 15 measurables that we see as critical to our organization. You know, hopefully they're mostly leading indicators, things that are giving us a pulse if we're on track. We want to assign who's accountable for each measurable. So the person accountable for the measurable, meaning who is responsible to deliver that number. Obvious one would be, if it's a revenue number, you probably have the head of sales on there. So we want to know who's accountable to deliver that number. We want to establish a weekly goal. We want to break this down into a weekly number and say, for a week, what's the right number to have? And then we just simply want to track it every week. We're looking at the trends here. So we're looking at every week, we want to look at the scorecard and review it and say, okay, did we hit the number or didn't we? And what is the trend looking like? So we can identify things that we need to address early before they become problems. Here are some examples of things people track. You know, some are not necessarily leading indicators, but it usually ties to something that's either an issue in the organization they're trying to solve or something that's significant that's going to help them move the organization forward. And so they could run from soup to nuts, but these are some typical examples that will often show up. And the second part of the data component is we want to attach measurables to jobs. And we say that, you know, some jobs inherently have numbers attached to them. You know, people really jump on the sales guys right away and give them a goal and then they can measure that. That's an easy one. But there's also some measurables that can be tied to every job or a scorecard metric that somebody can be accountable for. And so we really want to work to get every seat in the structure that has a number attached to it. So when we get this all rolled out in the organization, these circles represent departmental scorecards. So we have a leadership team scorecard and we have departmental scorecards, which have probably more detail, but more specific to the department. And then we actually have measurables tied to the jobs, and they may be simply metrics on a scorecard that somebody's seat is driving. So what are some of the common data issues? Number one, mediocre scorecards. It usually takes us about 6 months to get the scorecard dialed in. And once it's dialed in, it really is effective. If it doesn't get dialed in, it usually isn't as meaningful and people don't take action on it. Number two, accountability to address scorecard issues. So assuming you have a good scorecard and there's meaningful issues on there, or meaningful metrics on there, when it's off track for several weeks, we better be addressing it. So sometimes teams aren't really holding themselves accountable to address it. They say, well, yeah, we got a reason for it, and let it go rather than trying to figure out how to fix it. Some don't create the departmental scorecards. And so the real power in EOS comes from the rollout to the department levels. And so we want to make sure that we're creating department scorecards so that the person in the leadership team that has responsibility for sales has a sales scorecard for his whole department or her whole department behind them, where he or she can go back and say, okay, what are the metrics behind that? So if somebody asks a question why the sales department's off as a whole, there's more detail to look at. And there's also stuff that people in the department are attached to. And then another thing is not establishing measurables for every job. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we, again, are establishing measurables at the job level. So where we're at right now is, if you have everybody crystal clear on the vision, where you're going, how you're going to get there, you have all the right people in the right seats and everybody knows who's accountable for what, and you got clear data from top to bottom, what you're really going to do is you're creating this translucent organization where the issues are really going to flush out. And so we got to get good at solving issues. And there's 2 steps to this as well. One is a novel concept about creating a list. And we're really talking about multiple lists here. So when an issue comes up, what we want to do, first of all, is decide whose issue is it. Does it belong in the leadership team issue list? Does it belong at a department level? What department does it belong at? So let's get the issue assigned to the proper place to get solved by the right person or right team. And secondly, we want to do what we call IDS. We want to get good at solving issues, and we call that process IDS. So I stands for identify, D stands for discuss, and S stands for solve. And if you're like most organizations, you spend a lot of time in this discuss mode here. And my experience when I was in corporate America is we did a lot of discussing and we didn't do a lot of solving. And so what we really want to do is we want to get good at identifying the issue behind the issue. And when we say identify, typically what's on the list for the issue is often a symptom of something else. And so we want to step back and say, what is the root cause? What is the issue we're really trying to solve? Once we get that identified, we want to have a structured discussion around it. And then we want to make a decision, and we don't wait for consensus. We make the leader make the decision if there is a need to break a tie. So how it works is we have our issues list. We want to prioritize that issues list. We want to take the most important, most impactful things first, prioritize those number 1, 2, and 3. And then we want to go through our IDS process. So we take that first issue, we identify the root cause, we go around the table, share our thoughts on the solutions, we make a decision, and hopefully it goes away. And we do the same thing with number 2 and number 3, and we keep going until we run out of time. So some common issues I see here. Common issues with the issues. How's that go? Number 1, not assigning to the proper area. So sometimes leadership team thinks they got to solve all the issues without pushing those out. We want to make sure we get them to the proper area. Number 2, not prioritizing properly. It's tempting sometimes to avoid an issue that's not the most important, or avoid the one that's the most important because there's extenuating circumstances. For example, it's not easy, so we want to take the easy ones first. Sometimes there's fear of conflict. We know we're going to really irritate somebody if we dive into a certain issue, so we don't want to go there. Or we solve the symptom rather than the issue. We don't spend a good amount of effort in identifying the real issue. And so these are some common things I see happen. The IDS process intuitively sounds extremely simple and straightforward, but in practice, it seems to be one of the more difficult things for teams to master. Okay, process component is about 2 things, obviously. Number 1, documented. So we want people to document their processes at a high level. We call it core processes. So what we want to do is take a step back and actually sit back as a team and say, okay, what are the big processes in our organization? Every company has a handful of them. So they look something like this. Every company has an HR process, they have a sales and marketing process, they have an accounting process. We want the team to step back and agree to what these are, give them a name so that we can make sure we're checking them off as getting them done. And then we want to start documenting them, doing what we call the 20-80 rule. In other words, we want to document the 20% that gets you 80% of the value. I call it a checklist approach. So take the HR process. It starts with needing to fill a seat, and it ends with termination of employee, and what are all the steps in between. Let's lay those out, identify the what's, not the how's, put them in a checklist, usually 2, 3, 4 pages, and that's the HR process. Do the same thing with the rest of your processes. At some point, you'll get these all done. You can put them in a binder, put them in a shared folder, or however you want to capture them, and it becomes your way of doing business. We call it the ABC way. This is how the business is systemized. This is how people get up to speed quickly when they come in, because it's a quick reference guide, how the organization works and how they fit in. And then once that's documented, we want it followed by all. We want everybody in the organization following these processes, because the consistency is how we get success in the organization. So common process issues are, they never get documented because it's never a priority. We set those rocks every quarter, and I have to push sometimes to get a process rock on the issues list, or on the rock list. We tend to make them too complicated. Most organizations avoid this like the plague, because rather than the 20-80 rule, they're doing the 80-20 rule. They're trying to document 80% of the stuff rather than the 20%. So it gets to be too convoluted. Not enforcing compliance. Okay, we documented our processes, but now we got people that think they know how to do it better. They're creating downstream problems because they're not following the process. Okay, and the last component is traction. So traction is where the tire meets the road, as I said earlier, and we really want 2 things to happen here. We want rocks. So we talked about the rocks. In a perfect world, everybody in the organization has a rock, whether it's the CEO or the janitor. Everybody's working on something, some initiative to move the organization forward that's a little bit beyond their day job. And then secondly, we want to create a meeting pulse. And so a lot of people roll their eyes when we talk about meetings because, oh my God, another meeting. But here's how this works. We have a 90-day world, which I mentioned before. So we're asking an organization every 90 days, take a day off, not a day off, take a day out of your work week to get together and work on the business, to set rocks, review your vision, and make sure you're on course for what you're trying to do. Secondly, we ask each team to take time out every week to work on the business for 90 minutes. Leadership team should work for 90 minutes a week on the business, and the agenda should be the same every time, same day, same time, start on time, end on time. Sometimes get pushback on this, but when people finally embrace this, they find this is powerful. And so here's how the level 10 meeting works. We call it level 10 because we're going to ask you to rate the meeting at the end. We want it to be a 10. It starts with a segue. I want to spend 5 minutes going around the table. Everybody in the room shares two things. One thing personal, one thing professional that they think was good in the last week. The idea here is we want to celebrate what's good. We want to clear our head from any problems. We want to get to know each other better. So if we share one thing business-wise that's good, that reminds us, hey, we're doing good work here. If we share one thing personal, we get to know each other a little bit better. It helps build our team health. And both of those help clear our heads so we can think clearly and focus. Then we go into review mode. So we worked really hard. It took us 6 months to build the scorecard. We review that scorecard for 5 minutes. We go through line by line. If we did good work, those are the 5 to 15 most important numbers to look at every week. We want to make sure they're on track. If they're off track, we don't discuss it. We just put it down on our issues list. Number three, I should say, we want to review our rocks. So we took a day out of our life to sit down on a quarterly meeting. We set rocks. We agree those are priorities. We go through this list every week, one by one. The person responsible for that rock reports on track or off track. If it's on track, it's great. If it's off track, we don't discuss it. We just put it on our issues list. We go through a headline section. So did anything happen that we should know about with our people, with our customers, with our vendors? Or did anything big in the organization happen that just worth noting? We want to keep it tight, 5 quick minutes, but we want to share it. If it's good news, say, take a moment to celebrate. If it's bad news, let's put it on the issues list. And then the next step is number 5, the to-do list. So every meeting ends with a to-do list for the next week. If we've done issue solving well, there's to-dos that come out of that. We want to make sure that we're clear that those got done. The goal is 90% completion every week. Everybody that has a to-do has it assigned to them, and they have to report back it's done or not done. Again, 5 quick, quiet minutes. So again, this is reporting only. If we do really good work in 20 minutes, we've checked, or 25 minutes, we've checked in, we've reviewed our scorecard, which is our most important numbers. We reviewed our rocks, which are our most important initiatives. We've reviewed all our headlines, which are our most important things happening in the organization. And we've checked off our to-do list from last week. That leaves us 60 minutes to solve issues. And so we want to take 60 minutes to look at any issues that we carried over from last week, any issues people are bringing to the table for discussion this week, or anything that was off track up above. We look at that entire list. We prioritize, like we talked about earlier, 1, 2, and 3. Take the most important one. We do that IDS process. Take our next one. When we get to 60 minutes, we wrap up because we're respecting our time. And at the end of that 60 minutes, we conclude. And the conclusion consists of 3 things. What are the to-dos for next week? We solve some issues. What are the to-dos? Are they go gather information, communicate, whatever the case be? Any cascading messages that we need to share? Do we make decisions here that the rest of the organization needs to know? And then lastly, what's our rating? On a scale of 1 to 10, how do we do today? If it's not at least an 8 or a 9, why wasn't it? What was wrong? We're gonna have to be working together to make this a 10. So that's the level 10 agenda. Every week for the rest of your life, you never miss it. So 100% strong here means that everybody in the organization has rocks and everybody's doing some form of a meeting pulse. Now at a departmental level, it wouldn't be necessarily 90 minutes. It might be a 15-minute huddle in the morning in a production floor. It might be a half hour for one department, 45 minutes for another department. But the idea is everybody's meeting weekly and this stuff is cascading up and down through the organization. Common issues here, accountability. Do we really tackle the real issues? Sometimes I've observed these meetings and teams are never addressing the real issue. They're kind of kicking it to the side. Number two, team health. There's a lack of trust. So people are unwilling to engage in healthy conflict because they don't want to be vulnerable. Lack of discipline. Sometimes people spend time in that reporting phase making excuses or telling stories, and we chew up our issue solving time when we should be sticking just strictly to reporting. Sometimes failure to predict well. As a leadership team, one of our leadership abilities is to predict well, which means we're taking the most important things to get them solved and we're solving them. Some teams will skip meetings. So this is a really rigorous discipline. As long as there's a majority of people there, we want to meet every week. The goal is you should be planning your calendars around this level 10 meeting. You shouldn't be bumping the level 10 meeting around all the time, because this is where the consistency and communication comes into play, and where people really get on the same page and stay focused. So that's the EOS model. Hopefully you picked up a few nuggets there. At the end of the day, there are 5 foundational tools in the model. One called the Vision Traction Organizer. That's the 8 questions we talked about that capture the vision. The accountability chart, making it clear who's accountable for what. Executing against rocks. Having level 10 meetings. And having scorecards. This is 80% of the battle. If this is robust throughout the organization, it's a very powerful thing. Additional resources available. There are 5 books in the Traction series. Traction talks about this model that I just walked through. Get a Grip explains the process that a professional EOS implementer will take you through. Rocket Fuel talks about visionaries and integrators and how they're wired, and when they're working together on the same page, it's rocket fuel for the organization. How to Be a Great Boss talks about how we teach leading and managing people and making sure that we're executing good as leaders and managers. And what the heck is EOS, which is intended for when you roll it out to your employees and you're showing them EOS for the first time, they get a sense for what it is and what you guys are talking about as a leadership team. So additional resources, obviously the EOS World website is out there, my website's out there. I'm available. I'll give away 90 minutes of my time for anybody that wants to talk about EOS. And that's it. Questions?